Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Let us talk about NXT Stand and Deliver from April the 6th, 2023. Before we get into the show, I want to talk about Bloodsport a little bit. So Josh Barnett's Bloodsport took place on Thursday, April the 4th, which of course was my birthday. And Charlie Dempsey represented NXT at the show, wrestling some guy I've never seen before. But Charlie Dempsey looked great. That seems to be his lane, the grappling arts style of pro wrestling, which doesn't always get accepted by the WWE audience. That seems to be what Charlie Dempsey is very good at, and he's well trained at it. And people were shocked that Shayna Baszler was allowed to do it. I was less shocked, of course, that Charlie Dempsey was there, but I had not heard that he was advertised. So when I was watching the show and he was there, I was pleasantly surprised at how good he was. So shout out to Charlie Dempsey. That ruled. Now let's get into Stand and Deliver. We're going to start with the main event. Trick Williams defeated Carmelo Hayes. Hell of a contest between these two guys. The story was a simple one. Carmelo Hayes is cocky, and that's what he was doing. He was being cocky. He was flipping all over Trick Williams. He smacked him in the back of the head. He was walking on his back in the Shawn Michaels style that Shawn used to do to people. He was basically dominating. Carmelo Hayes was dominating Trick Williams here and there when they were actually wrestling and doing moves. But as on commentary, they're putting over that Trick Williams is a fighter. He's not a wrestler. You know, he's a street fighter. He's a brawler. And I know people are going to cook me for saying this, but Trick Williams reminds me a lot of John Cena. And that is A+ aesthetics, A+ charisma, A+ presence. Wrestling, maybe a C+. Okay. His clotheslines look amazing. Some of the other things he look are amazing. His fire is really good. That's really what gets people behind him. Is Trick Williams has tremendous fire. He sells really well. And it was believable, even in this match when he had a substantially smaller opponent, that his stuff looked good. They did some crowd brawling, which, going into the crowd and fighting. There were 2 different ref bumps, which I don't think we needed, but whatever. You had Carmelo Hayes targeting the midsection for Trick Williams, which, Trick is a well put together guy. Seemed like it was a weird position to go for the midsection, but they ended up going for the leg later, but they didn't stick with it. Carmelo Hayes hits the nothing but net. The referee was down. Then another referee comes in. Trick Williams kicks out. They do a little bit more than the trick shot. The flying knee connects, and Trick Williams pins Carmelo Hayes. Really good match. Trick Williams might be one of the most over baby faces in wrestling right now. I'm talking like WWE and AEW. It was a huge audience there for NXT. I think they said it was 13,000, maybe a little over. And they were in unison, whooped that Trick. I mean, the energy was amazing. During the entrance where you followed him to the ring, it was amazing. From bell to bell, I think Trick Williams probably had the best match of his career. If not the best, and probably the second best compared to his Dragonov contest. But this guy, I am so concerned that he's going to get to the main roster and Triple H is going to be like, and that's it. Because that's why I wanted to really press that he reminds me of John Cena. In so much as he can do a lot of the ancillary things in relation to pro wrestling extremely well. Promo, look, presentation, talking, it just seems like he got it all together. He gets in the ring and he bumps kind of weird. And sometimes he misses a spot here and there. He might actually be a little slow on a spot here and there. And that stuff, timing, it comes with time. More time in the ring, more time in main events, working with better people. He's going to get better at that. But I have a feeling that Triple H is going to put a lid on that and just decide that he's a mid-carder and just keep him stuffed somewhere and not doing much of anything once he moves up to the main roster, where this is the kind of guy that you should be grooming to be one of the faces of your company, especially as a baby face, because he's so good and because he can sell and because he can talk, which is the most important elements. My issue with Triple H is that he underestimates guys with charisma that can talk. And even if they're not great in the ring, charisma and personality go so far. And the Vinces, McMahon and McMahon the second, VJM, VKM, they both would go against the grain. You know, Vincent J. McMahon with like superstar Billy Graham. Everybody talked about how he sucked in the ring. He wasn't the best wrestler in the world, but he could talk and he had charisma and he had presence. And you can watch superstar Billy Graham have matches and they were phenomenal. And then he buckled under the pressure eventually and put the belt on a traditional wrestler in Bob Backlund and probably dragged the company down when he didn't need to, when it probably could have kept growing if he'd have left the belt on superstar Billy Graham. It was similar with Bruno Sammartino, which if you read like old magazines or old articles and stuff like this, you'll see that a lot of people hated Bruno when Vince started pushing him eventually. At first, people hated Bruno. They didn't think he was any good. It took some time for Vince to, let Bruno develop a little bit, but he still saw Bruno as being his guy. He didn't go away from it. And we know that Vincent K with Hogan and Warrior and, Rock and Cena, not traditional pro wrestlers, but guys have presence, they have charisma, and he goes with it. Triple H has not shown that he's willing to go with a guy who has presence and who has charisma, but is awkward or let's say substandard in a way in a ring. He has not shown any dedication to that. And that's what you need for a guy like Trick Williams to work. He doesn't have a lot of experience. Wrestling is not something he probably wanted to grow up doing. I think he probably was a football player, so he's got to get the hang of this. And I also love that Trick Williams is not a stupid mark. He got asked about doing a death match because now all of a sudden WWE is doing stuff with GCW. Well, basically it was Charlie Dempsey on Bloodsport. And CM Punk went to a GCW show, and you're like, "Oh, Trick Williams, would you want to do a death match?" And he's looking like, "What? I'm an entertainer. That's not what I do. It ain't what we do here." And I was like, "That's a perfect response. Why do you need to roll around in thumbtacks? You actually have talent. When you have no talent, or you're weirdly built, or something like that. Maybe you need to do the thumbtacks and all that kind of stuff. Most people don't need to do that." But not to diss Carmelo Hayes, I've been talking about Trick Williams a lot, but I think Trick has far more upside than Carmelo. I'm concerned about Carmelo Hayes in terms of main roster too, but mostly because Triple H is infatuated with other people, and I'm not so sure Carmelo Hayes can get through that miasma that Triple H is creating of boring bums that he loves on the main roster. But maybe Carmelo Hayes is good enough in the ring, and he is really good, to make that work and make that transition. They showed a hype video for Javon Evans, who was a very athletic young man. He's only 19. He referred to his style as bouncy. I know I've seen clips of him on Level Up. I know I've heard that he wrestled on the indies for a little while. He's extremely young, extremely. We'll see whether he can really put a match together on Tuesday. Ilia Dragonov defeated Tony D'Angelo to maintain his hold on the NXT Championship. He wins with a super H-bomb from the top rope. I learned today that the H-bomb is actually a move that Dragonov picked up from Dan Henderson, a former MMA. Well, I don't know if he's a former MMA fighter or is he still. Well, Dan Henderson was like in his 30s 10 years ago. But these guys tend to hang around forever, just in the periphery. But there was a fight where Dan Henderson just jumped on top of a guy like Ilia Dragonov does. And he called it the H-bomb because it's from his right hand. And so that's what Dragonov got the name for it from, which is very cool. Tony D'Angelo is a mobster with nobility. He didn't want to take the brass knuckles that Stax was trying to give him to him. He didn't want to win the title like that. Ilya Dragunov was actually, taunting Stax at one point as he was beating the shit out of Tony D'Angelo. And Stax was about to jump in the ring and Tony D'Angelo had to tell him to stand down. So this is a very interesting bit that they were doing here where Stacks was, trying to be a traditional gangster and Tony D'Angelo is the boss and is trying to be, somewhat noble. And it seems like they successfully separated Trick Williams and Carmelo Hayes, and it looked like Stacks and Tony D'Angelo are probably going to be next. Where, Stacks is probably going to say, well, if you listen to me, boss, if you listen to me, we could have been champion. And that's probably going to be the schism between the two of them. Dragonov winning, I'm not surprised that they didn't go with Tony D'Angelo. I'm okay with that. I would have loved for Tony D'Angelo to win the belt, but I'm okay with him not winning it. It was a very hard-fought match. Can't really complain. They did a really good job there. Lyra Valkyria lost the championship to Roxan Perez, the NXT Women's title. Roxan Perez wins by submission, which is very surprising. And it was virtually clean. Roxan Perez and Lyra Valkyria had a really good match. Technically proficient. The spots went pretty well. Tatum Paxley came out, but she was not really a distraction. She got in there a little bit, but she didn't cause too much of a distraction. She had no factor into the finish. It was simply Roxan Perez's dogged determination to tear up the shoulder and arm of Lyra Valkyria that led to her actually winning. The Tornado DDT from the Tope Suicida was just cold-blooded. So it was a hell of a women's match. I knew it would be. The crowd was kind of sleeping on it at first, but they got into it by the end, and people were ready for Roxan Perez to win, and they responded well to her winning, much to my surprise. Roxan Perez is actually now over, and people actually care about her. So she won. She's the champion. Tatum Paxley tried to console Lyra Valkyria after the match, but Lyra Valkyria was upset. She said it's not the time, and she's not interested. So we'll see where that goes. But Lyra Valkyria had run out of steam as champion. I'm not sure if Roxan Perez was the right person, but they decided to go with that. Before and after the match, they showed Julia, the Stardom prospect, in outside the ring. She was sitting with Rosie Ogawa and William Regal. This has led to a lot of fuss online about Tony Khan, and I don't know if his name is Rosie or Rossi. One of the two. It doesn't matter. The Japanese Stardom guy who got fired. Apparently she's going to be joining NXT, Julia, and they're already teasing her and Roxan Perez. And okay, they probably should show us why we should care about her, but people were very excited. She got the old school NXT thing where she was just sitting out in the crowd, and she stood up, I think, and barely acknowledged the audience. But it was what it was. So a lot of WWE fans are now trying to pretend that they know who Julia is. I'm not. I've watched some Stardom, and I've seen matches of Julia. I'm not that familiar with her. I can't point you in the direction of a match that you should care about, if we're being honest. But I've seen matches from her before. She's a harder hitting Joshi than most of the other girls, and she's a little bit taller and leaner. So she might have some really good success, but it might be a while before she comes in to NXT too. But it got a good reaction in the online buzz where people was like, Tony Khan was right. Rosie Ogawa, he was a double agent for WWE. And it's like, oh my God. Literally 2 people from Stardom jumped ship to WWE, which one was Kairi Sane at the end of her contract, and the other was like the EO, and that was years ago. Like that was it. He was a mole for WWE because 2 people left. I guess Saray left too, so that made him 3. So like 3 left. And I don't know, how long has Asuka been there? She's been there since, 2015, maybe? 2014? So about 9 or 10 years. In that time, only like 3 women from Stardom jumped ship to WWE. If he was a mole, he's one of the worst moles of all time. Imagine you got the, I hate to compare it, but imagine you've got the Underground Railroad, and you only managed to get three people out of off the plantation in like 20 years. We only got 3 people off the plantation. Is that a success? Like, I guess one person is a success, but it's shitty. And Tony Khan's just being shitty and pissy because he wanted all this stuff to himself and he can't get it. So you're a double agent. As opposed to being in his pocketbook, you're in Triple H's pocketbook. Yes, who cares, really? I hope well for Julia. I hope this thing turns out better than it did for Saray. Saray just got caught in a really bad time, I think, where NXT 2.0 was trying to force gimmicks onto people. And to me, she had a nice little gimmick already before she started doing the Sailor Moon thing. And that one just wasn't going to work. And she's a very young girl, too. So, I mean, it was weird. She might come back one day. Who knows? But the women's wrestling thing gets a big pedestal as they're now going to have a women's North American Championship. And they're going to announce a tournament or whatever they're going to do for this thing upcoming on NXT. I'm going to be very honest with you. One, there may be too many championships in WWE as it is. I know NXT is pretty much its own branch. But having a women's mid-card belt, okay. I would have preferred if they kept women's tag team titles, but a women's mid-card belt, okay, fine. But why does it need to be the women's North American title? Why can't you call it something different? You already have a North American Championship. You could call it, I don't know, the NXT television title, and it's only for the girls. The NXT European Championship, and it's only for the girls. You know, or something like that. Something that would have made it unique. Just smashing women's on North American title is kind of lame. You know, and it's just a palette swap of the belt that already exists. You know, so it's kind of lame. It's very lame. I'm okay with it. I know this is proof of concept for a mid-card belt on the main roster, where the people are trying to end up fighting for this women's Intercontinental Championship, the women's United States title, and all that kind of stuff. When you could go back in history, find old championships where names are not being used anymore, or championships that other companies have that WWE doesn't have, like a WWE national title. You know, like, yeah, what nation are you talking about? Doesn't matter because it's only for the girls anyway. You know, television title, national title, something like that, where it's individualized. It's just not a palette swap of the men's belt, and it's too many belts. You know, I could complain about that, but it is what it is. I'm okay with women's tag team titles. I'm not so much that they need another singles belt, but it is what it is. Thea Hale, Kalani Jordan, and Fallon Henley defeated Kiana James, Izzy Dame, and JC Jane. Booker T was on commentary in this match talking about tag team titles that did not exist. He was saying something about people will still be a tag team champion if they mind their own business and all this kind of stuff. Like, he's making his own stories up in his head. It's fantastic. He's poor at this job, Booker T, but he's so enthusiastic. And I think he's getting it mixed up with something that he does on his show, but it's really funny. And it was really hilarious. They told the story that Thea Hill was being dodged by JC Jane all night. JC Jane didn't want to interact with Thea Hill. And then eventually she ended up, catching each other, and they ended up fighting with Thea beating her up. The finish comes with Thea Hill submitting Izzy Dame. That was fine. It was a little fun match. It left open Thea Hill versus JC Jane, so you could tell that thing is not done because those girls really didn't get into each other the way that they would have wanted to. But it was a solid enough 6-woman tag. Not offensive, not a waste of time either. All right, second match on the show. Dijak, Josh Briggs, Obafemi, North American title. Obafemi wins the match by powerbombing Dijak atop Josh Briggs to win. This match was nuts because of all the spots. It was better than I expected it to be. I still hate triple threat matches. That elevated Death Valley driver spot, though, was tremendous. Obafemi has legs like oxen. I cannot believe his ACL, his knee, his meniscus, and any other tendon in his legs didn't shake, rattle, and roll, as he had these two gigantic people on his shoulders at the same time. And I'm surprised nobody died. Just being honest, I'm surprised Obafemi's legs didn't give out. I'm surprised nobody died. So it was crazy. You had a crazy Canadian destroyer from Dijak, because we must do stuff like that. Briggs did a hip toss to Dijak onto Obafemi, who was sitting in a chair. There's a lot of spots in this thing. Obafemi wins the match. It was fine. Can't complain. Obafemi wins, so that's good. Can't complain about that. I mean, why would I do that? All right, the first match, Bron Breakker and Baron Corbin defeated Axiom and Nathan Fraser. A really good opener. The crowd was actually cheering for Baron Corbin, which I know has to be new for him. He's not used to crowds actually liking him. But Bron Breakker was going nuts in this match. He ran up the ropes, flexed, and did a Frankensteiner. Then Baron Corbin botched the powerbomb spot. We were supposed to catch him and then powerbomb him, and he botched it. Corbin did a top rope Uso splash, which was, wow. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. These guys were just doing all kinds of stuff to each other. They went out there and they had fun. This was essentially a babyface versus babyface match. So Bron Breakker, he's still in NXT, still teaming up with Baron Corbin, and he won. Can't complain there. Very solid run of matches, nothing horrible. There are clearly certain things I was more into than others. The 6-woman tag was fine. It was perfectly TV friendly, but good. The main events delivered. Dragonov and Tony D'Angelo and Trick Williams and Carmelo Hayes, and the women's championship was really good. They had some surprises with Julia being in the crowd in the announcement of the women's North American title. The opening of the show had Joe Gacy defeat Shawn Spears in a match I didn't bother to watch, but I knew it occurred, so I might as well mention it. But I think NXT delivered a very solid show. A very good appetizer for WrestleMania. Trick Williams, super over. And NXT did a good number this week, too. It was like 600 and something, which was a solid enough number. It's been going backwards for like a month or two. So it picked up over the last couple of weeks, which was very good. 13,000 in the building, apparently. A lot of that is WrestleMania overflow, but still great crowd for them. Everything about this was very solid. Camera work was really good. Booking decisions were really solid. I wish they would turn the lights on the crowd. It's a Triple H thing, I guess, with the turning the lights off on the crowd. I wish they wouldn't do that. But overall, man, I can't complain about this show. I thought it was very good, and I think it went off very well. But let me know what you guys think. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session, but you got an affection for no progression, regression.